Okay. I'll probably pick that spot by the tree over there.
Oh yeah, yeah. Actually, once you get back there, you'll see the whole area in the back is really.
Yes. Thank you so much. It's a beautiful property.
Thank you. I hope you have a great time.
Thank you. Just perfect. Absolutely perfect. I'm so glad that I found this place. Finally, St. Augustine, the oldest European and African settlement in America. This settlement was established 42 years before the English settled Jamestown in Virginia. My first destination today is the Great Cross, where Spanish planted the cross of Christianity when landed here on September 8, 1565. This cross was built in 1966 to mark the 400 years anniversary of that important event. It is 208 feet high or 64 meters, so everyone in nearby St. Augustine historic city could see it. Father Richard Arthur in 1593 was the first Irish missionary, followed by hundreds of Irish priests and sisters to serve the people of La Florida.
And they asked St. Augustine, would you like the casket? And they said yes. And I think the reason they said they gave it up is because we had to replace the two ends, the top and the back, with Spanish cherry wood.
And his bones are still in Spain.
Right there, in that sarcophagus.
Okay.
In Spain, in Aviles, Spain. But he landed out there in 1565, September 8th, a very important day in the Catholic Church because it's the birth or nativity of Mary. He landed on that day, and when he put a flag in the ground out there, we had a settlement for Spain, but it was also the beginning of St. Augustine, 1565, September 8th.
The oldest city in U.S.
Yeah. And that's where the first Catholic parish mass was conducted. Because once he landed, and Father Lopez, he was the senior priest on the boats, the chaplain. He conducted the first Catholic parish mass out there. And after that mass, Pedro Menendez told the Spaniards to bring food. They brought food. And right here, when he landed, was, you can pronounce it either way, Temucan or Timucua Native American village. And they invited them. And they sat down and had a great feast and gave praise to God. We're talking about the first Thanksgiving in what is now the United States, not the Pilgrims.
Interesting, so interesting.
So, a lot of history.
Just a short walking distance to the north is a Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park. They're beautiful people.
They are. Quite a charming couple.
Especially she.
Yeah. No, they said that she was a bit younger than he was.
Oh, okay.
Eventually, Ferdinand, when there are these rumors and legends of ideas about not fountains of eternal life, but waters of vitality, that idea is being spread by indigenous people in the island areas, like the Taino in Puerto Rico.
Okay.
They want to get the Spaniards off their islands, so they spread these waters of vitality. And it's said that when Ponce de Leon, a year prior to his exploration up this way, as he's asking, to fly under Spanish flag, permission to do that, the charter never mentioned looking for a fountain of youth. It was more to find a new governorship, possibly gold, silver, and spices. But King Ferdinand did say, by the way, if you run across those waters of vitality, bring some back for me.
Makes sense. I would ask for same thing. In 1934, local farmers decided to cultivate these grounds and immediately found human bones. Later, the archaeologists from Smithsonian Institution determined that this is a burial site of Native people. The explorer Ponce de Leon sailed to this land in April of 1513 and named it La Florida, the land of flowers. About a mile south is Castillo de San Marcos, an ancient Spanish fortification that attracts millions of visitors each year to St. Augustine. This is the oldest masonry fort in the United States. The construction began in 1672 and it was designed by Spanish military engineer Ignacio Daza. However, he died only 7 months after arriving in Florida and didn't see his project completion. The fort was attacked and under siege by the British in 1702 and 1740, but it was never taken over by force. The British gained control over Florida in a peaceful treaty in 1763, but it was transferred back to Spain shortly after. And finally, in 1819, Spain signed a treaty and ceded Florida to the United States in 1821. My friends, make sure you have at least 3 days to see all the important sites in St. Augustine. Also, don't miss the opportunity to visit the oldest house in the United States.
As you come out here, I want you to notice that large jar right over there. That large jar would be at the corners of that building I showed you, the little white building, with pipes coming off the roofs to capture the rainwater. Now this is our courtyard. You see grass, you see pavers. It would not have looked like this back then. This would have been dirt, and if it started to rain like today, it's going to turn to mud. The animals would be on the other side of that wall over there, and over in this area would be all their gardens. The building you're looking at over there is the kitchen. Kitchen outside for 3 reasons. First reason, fire. If you did have a fire in the kitchen, well, you're going to lose all the wood, but you can see it's made of coquina, and coquina will stand up against the fire. So you could quickly build your kitchen back. However, that kitchen's in your house, you've lost your house and your kitchen in a fire. Second reason outside is heat. Can get very hot in St. Augustine. You don't want to add that cooking heat to your house. Last reason, you have neighbors in the area that may not have a kitchen. Some of those you would allow to use your kitchen, but you wouldn't necessarily want them in your home. As you come in here, I want to talk to you about this stone. This stone comes from the Canary Islands. It is a volcanic basalt stone. It is porous, and you can see water will filter through it. The ships bring the stones in. It would be a square stone on the ship. They use it for ballast, keep the ships upright. You would send your little boys down with some produce to hopefully trade for one. Or, if you had money, buy one from a ship. Bringing it back, you would have it carved out. Your little boy gets that bucket of water. Let's take a look at our well water. Remember, I told you it's not the best. You can see not very good at all. Now, as the water is filtered through there, it's going to take some, and I emphasize some, of the impurities out of that water. Let's take a look at the water that's passed through. You can see much, much better. Now the family's here and they're cooking in that kitchen I showed you out there. Bringing the food in, they would have eaten on a table such as this one. Once they were done with their food, anything left over goes up here. This is called a rat rack. A rat rack, there's ships coming into St. Augustine. Rats love to travel on them. You have those open windows, wood slats. Rat squeezes through. Knows your food's up there. He's going to get up there. You get one of your boys, you tell him, get the rat, kill the rat, and throw it back out in the street. Send their boys down to fish. They bring the fish back. The family will eat the fish, but they save the fish oil. Putting it in this little lamp, the fish oil with other oils will give them a flame about that high. So at the end of the war, Spain asked the British, hey, we know you won the war. Would you consider trading Cuba for Florida? We'd like to have Cuba back. Well, why would the British consider it? Go back into our museum. Look up Governor Moore. Governor Moore was British. And in 1702, the same time this house was being built, he came down with the British militia. They attacked the fort. Could not take the fort, made of coquina by then. So they sacked and burned St. Augustine and went back to the Carolinas. But in 1740, General Oglethorpe came down, a British general with the British Army, setting up over on Anastasia Island. They bombarded our fort for 27 days. All 1,500 Spanish went to live in the fort with the soldiers during that bombardment. Fortunately, Cuba was able to get 4 ships up for the Spanish with more men, ammunition, and food, and General Oglethorpe gave up and went back to Georgia. So you can see the British have been after Florida for quite some time. So they say, of course, we'll trade. So now our Spanish have to leave. Our family goes to Cuba. Now you have the British coming. And you know what the British did to Florida when they first came? Divided it into 2. West Florida and East Florida. Now you had the 13 colonies under the British. You now have 15 colonies. This is a British pine floor, 1778. And notice that the planks are all different sizes. That's because it was hand cut by the British in 1778. 1776, Revolutionary War. Of course, we know the colonies were fighting against the British, and of course you know the colonies win. But I'll bet there's one thing you may not know, is that during that war, the colonies tried to take Florida from the British many times, and they could not do it. You hear a lot about the French helping the colonies, but you're not going to hear too much about the Spanish helping them. But they did, and they did immensely. In fact, during that war, they captured Gibraltar, and Gibraltar was very important to the British. So at the end of the war, Britain asked Spain, hey, we know you got Gibraltar. Would you consider trading Gibraltar, say, for Florida? And Spain jumped on it. So now the Spanish are coming back, and the British have to leave.
There is so much to see in this historic city, and if you enjoy history, make sure to visit Fort Matanzas National Monument. It's about a 30-minute drive on the A1A south from St. Augustine.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I'm Ranger Caroline, and on behalf of the National Park Service, I'd like to welcome you to Fort Matanzas, the only fortified watchtower with Spanish architecture in the continental United States. And it all starts with what's right over there. Underneath that bridge, that's the Matanzas Inlet. Now that inlet serves as both an entrance and an exit to the city of St. Augustine, 14 miles this way to our north. Now you want to be able to control that traffic, and that's why this fort is here, to prevent enemy ships from sailing north and attacking the city. So while St. Augustine was founded in 1565, I'd like to start our story today almost 200 years later, in 1740. Now, although St. Augustine was the first permanent European settlement in what is now the United States, by 1740, the Spanish faced a threat to the north, and that was the British. Now the British, led by James Oglethorpe, sailed south from the colony of Georgia, and he laid siege to St. Augustine starting on June 13th, 1740. Now, with concentrations on the downtown area in the later part of that conflict, St. Augustine was successfully resupplied through the Matanzas Inlet. and the siege ended shortly after that on July 20th, 1740. And this demonstrates the importance of this location to the survival of St. Augustine, because that inlet is a back door to the city. That's why construction on the fort that you see today started shortly after those events in the fall of 1740, and it was completed less than 2 years later in 1742. So not only is this a strategic location, but this inlet is very shallow. Only smaller boats could make it through, like sloops or galleys. And this is important because those smaller ships can't hold the size or number of cannons that you need to be able to take on a fort's walls. So Fort Matanzas is pretty small, but it's the perfect size for what you need at this location. Anything bigger out here just wasn't necessary. Now, the soldiers stationed here were also responsible for patrolling the coastlines, and those patrols brought in pirates, a lot of shipwreck survivors, fugitives, and deserters. But it's safe to say the soldiers stationed here spent more time out there than they did firing the cannons at enemy ships. Now, this building housed an average of 7 men for a period of about 30 days at a time, a whole month. Now, as you can see behind me, there's a 2-story structure. There's a top floor and a bottom floor, but each one of those stories is a single room. So the bottom room down here, that's the enlisted men's barracks. That room was shared by an average of 6 guys, but they're working in shifts. So 3 could be working while 3 could be resting. Now, the top room up here, that's the officers' quarters. Again, it's a single room, but he's got that room all to himself. Now, in that room, he's also got the food storage, the entrance to the powder magazine, and the ladder that goes to the very, very top, the observation deck. Now, you all are welcome to go up the ladder and venture to the observation deck today. And it's a pretty cool view up there. But keep in mind, it's a very different view than what somebody would have seen about 281 years ago. And it starts with the inlet itself. The Matanzas Inlet has actually shifted south by about a half mile. So historically, they had a closer view to the ocean than what we're going to have today. Well, as you can imagine, Fort Matanzas looks a little different too. Today, we see this exposed coquina stone. But historically, this structure was coated in a bright white plaster, and it was decorated with red details. Same colors as the flag that we're going to raise over the fort this morning. It's a white square with a red cross going through it. That flag is called the Cross of Burgundy, and it's a first period Spanish flag, and that would have been the first flag to fly over this fort. So having the structure the same colors was a symbol to those enemy ships approaching that they were now in Spanish territory. This site became a national monument in 1924. Today, Fort Matanzas stands as a reminder of the strength and the wealth of the Spanish Empire. And while Fort Matanzas was built by the Spanish, today it belongs to all of us.
My dear friends, do you ever wonder what people will think of us in another 500 years? To me, it's an uncomfortable thought. Will they talk about our care for nature and kindness towards our brothers and sisters of every nation, race, and continent? Or will they display our weapons and flags as a lesson to learn from, just like we are trying to learn and stand today from people who passed here before us?